These are the math channel settings. On the standard 500 megabyte on this recorder, you're going to get 100 math channels. If you do buy the 1.2 gig internal memory, you'll get 200 math channels. But each of these math channels, you can program up to 120 characters of math expression. It's just like entering an equation in a spreadsheet. You got absolute, log, exponential, greater than, less than, equal than. Here's some other operands. You got T-log, C-log, max, min, sum. This is my favorite, if, then, else. So you can do a lot of logic control with that. But there's some neat features here. This C-log function, what C-log does, if I programmed C-log max, I could take maybe 8 or 10 different channels, put them in one equation, and do the C-log max, and it would plot only the highest value it saw out of those 8 inputs as a trend line unto itself. I could do a C-log min, and it would plot only the lowest value. Do a C-log average, it would plot an average of those 8 values. So there's a lot you can do here with these math. I very seldom sell a recorder without math. It just brings too much to the party. But you're going to have 120 characters of equation. And each of these math channels, they stand alone as a separate pin. They look just like the regular hardwired analog input pins. Okay? They've got their own alarm trip points. You got 4 alarm trip points per math channel. It's got its own particular name, its own particular color for that particular pin. It looks just like a regular pin on the recorder. Okay, there's constants associated, variable constants, math action settings. Quite a bit you can do with that. Here's some logic math settings. These are more, for the controller aspect. For the recorder, you get back to these basic display settings. For instance, like a trend interval, you might want to have a change in your chart speed. You might want to have that recorder go from 1 minute to 15 seconds for an operator. Here's the different group settings. You got 50 different groups. You can name these groups anything you want. And basically, you're going to go in and tell it which channels you want to display in a particular group. You can have any combination of up to 20 channels per group. But you can choose analog input, DI, DO, PID channels, math channels, COM channels. So you just basically tell it what channels you want to display in that group. The trend settings, you can have your trends moving in a horizontal fashion. You can have the old classic waterfall mode. The trends can be going vertical. The background color can be either white or black. There's a lot of settings you can do, a lot of customization you can do here. These message settings are important because you can pre-program up to 100 different messages in here that will automatically write based upon certain events happening. Kind of a combination of the internal switches and the event action. And I'm going to show you that in a minute because that's the important part. Trend settings, I think we just looked at that. Screen display settings, here's where you tell it whether you want the background to be white or black. You can have different brightness adjustments. I'll jump it up to 6 real quick and just show you what that looks like. Oh, I've got an active recording session here, so I can't make that change. So let me just change that. Now I'll change that to 6. You should be able to see a noticeable brightness there in that screen. I usually have mine down on about 4 because it makes for a real nice display. Okay, so I'm gonna jump down to, well, let's go to measurement settings first. There's a little bit of a difference between scan rate and log rate on here. I think you need to be aware of. The scan interval, the measurement settings scan interval is really the scan rate of the A to D. It's how often the A to D is looking at all the I/O. But the recording interval, the log rate, is the resolution of the data that's being logged in the data file. So when we look at the data on the PC, I'll talk a little bit more about that. Here's the recording settings. Basic recording settings. You're just going to basically make a choice on how you want to log this data. You can log this data in a display file, an event file, or you can have both display and event file logging at the same time. The main difference between these types of files, a display file emulates an old drag pen recorder. So if you remember on a piece of paper, no matter how many times that drag pen went up and down on that piece of chart paper, what you saw in the end was how high it went and how low it went. It painted that chart until that chart drive moved one click of the cog, so to speak, okay? That was an old drag pen recorder. That's what display mode emulates. The display mode, if you're logging in display mode, you'll log 2 values for every pixel movement across that chart, that maximum and the minimum value that channel saw. That channel, you might be logging a value every second, But during that 1 second in time, that recorder was sampling every 100 milliseconds. So during that 1 second in time, there was 10 samples taken on that particular channel. What it saves in display mode is the highest value and the lowest value out of those 10 seconds, okay? Display an event, you can have a display mode being logged, and then you can have an event mode ready to capture data at a much faster log rate in the background if you have an alarm trip point or something like that. Event mode is like the old classic dotting recorder. There was a paper recorder where it would make a dot on a piece of chart paper. And what it would do, and if you were logging a value every second, it would ignore the previous 9 values and only log the 10-second value, only log the 10th sample it saw at that 1 second, okay? So there's 2 or 3 different ways to log data here, but you will need to go in and tell the recorder which channels you want to log under these scenarios. So I've got these channels log in under a display data file. If I wanted to do an event file, I would have this many channels log in. If I want to do a manual sample, I would have this many channels log in. But it is important to go in and turn these boxes blue, turn these boxes on to make sure that they're logging data. Okay? Now we get down to the data save settings. This is the directory all the data is going to go into. If you've got multi-batch or batch turned on the recorder, you can have not only the date and the serial number, but a linear number, but you can also have the batch name included as part of the data file. And that's a real nice thing to have. If I have multi-batch, I always choose the batch name to be part of the data file. It makes it a lot more intuitive when you're going and looking at over hundreds of files. On the media, if you have media FIFO turned on the removable media, what will happen is when that media fills, it'll write over the oldest data file on that media. So you've got a first in, first out. You're constantly cycling those files. Okay? On this particular recorder, you can log data in both binary and text format. Binary is a more secure format. Text format is kind of like CSV. You can open it with Notepad or an ASCII. But the binary format is typically what you're going to want for this particular recorder, because most of the people buy these recorders to store data, regulatory type data. Okay? Here's the batch settings. You can turn batch on. You can tell it how many spaces you want in your lot number, anywhere from 4 to 8. Auto increment can be either on or off. So report settings, here's, this recorder will do a basic report automatically for you as long as you've got math purchased. You can do hourly, daily, weekly, monthly, batch reports, custom reports, and it's really just a matter of telling it what type of report you want to run, and then you go and you tell it what channels you want to be included in that particular report.